Her wish was 5 children, and the cowboy who was never meant to love again. Wild West story. The town was tiny, with a few wooden buildings lining the main street, a general store that sold a little bit of everything, and a blacksmith who worked tirelessly from dawn to dusk. Clara's home was a modest wooden house with a small garden in the back. It was not much, but to Clara, it was full of possibilities. She spent her mornings helping her mother cook and clean, and her afternoons tending to her garden, planting vegetables and watering the flowers. Every little bloom made her feel alive, reminding her that even in a harsh world, life could be beautiful. From a very young age, Clara had a dream. She often imagined a home filled with laughter, a house bursting with the sound of little feet running around, 5 children playing in the yard, and a family that loved each other deeply. She had seen families in town, and while some struggled, others seemed happy. Clara wanted that happiness for herself, not just a home or money, but love and family. She would sit on the wooden fence at the edge of her garden, looking at the open fields beyond, and whisper to herself about the future she wished for. She didn't know who would help her build that life, but she believed deep down that it was possible. Life in the town was not easy, and Clara knew that. She saw the hardships around her. Farmers losing crops because of drought, families struggling to make ends meet, and neighbors who fought against loneliness. But instead of letting it make her bitter, she chose to see the good in people. She helped anyone who needed it, whether it was carrying water for an elderly neighbor, helping the children read and write, or simply listening when someone needed to talk. Her kindness became well known in the town, and people began to respect her for her heart more than anything else. Despite the peaceful appearance of her life, Clara's heart longed for something more. She wanted a love that was strong and steady, a partner who would share in her dreams, and children who would make their house feel alive. She imagined evenings sitting by a warm fire with her family gathered around, telling stories and sharing laughter. She would think about each child, picturing their faces, their personalities, and how each would bring joy and chaos to her life. To her, these dreams were not childish fantasies. They were a vision of a life worth living, a life she was determined to make real. At the same time, not far from Clara's home, there was another soul living a very different life. Eli was a cowboy, tall and strong, with hands calloused from years of work. His face was rugged, and his eyes held a depth that only came from pain. He had once loved and lost more than anyone should have to. Years ago, he had been married, and he had children, or at least had dreamed of them. But a tragic accident had taken his family from him, leaving him alone in a world that suddenly seemed too harsh to survive. Since that day, Eli had made a promise to himself. He would never open his heart to love again. He would live his life on the open range, caring only for his horse, his land, and the quiet peace that solitude offered. Love to him was a memory too painful to revisit, a flame that could only burn his heart again. Eli spent his days traveling between ranches, helping wherever he was needed. He was respected by those who knew him, not because he was outgoing or friendly, but because he was reliable, strong, and capable. Children often whispered stories about the mysterious cowboy who never stayed in one place for too long, and the townspeople often wondered if he would ever find peace. But Eli avoided attachments, avoided the towns, and avoided anyone who might want more than his company. He believed that was safer for everyone, especially himself. Despite the differences in their lives, Clara and Eli were destined to cross paths. Their worlds were separate, yet close enough that fate could bring them together. One day, as Clara was walking to the market, she noticed the distant figure of a man on horseback. His posture was confident, yet there was a sadness in the way he moved, as if every step reminded him of something he had lost. Clara felt a strange curiosity, a pull she could not explain. She had seen many travelers pass through the town, but there was something about this man, Eli, that made her heart skip a beat. Meanwhile, Eli was riding along the dusty trail, thinking of nothing in particular, just the rhythm of his horse beneath him and the endless sky above. He had not planned to stop in the town that day, but something tugged at him. Perhaps it was the smell of fresh bread from the bakery, or maybe it was the warmth of the sun on his face. Whatever it was, he slowed his horse, allowing himself to notice the life around him for the first time in years. Children played near the well, women carried baskets of vegetables, and the townspeople went about their business. And then he saw her, Clara, standing by her garden, her hair catching the sunlight, her hands full of flowers. In that moment, time seemed to slow. Neither of them spoke, and yet both felt the stirrings of something new. Clara felt a mixture of curiosity and hope, wondering who this stranger was and why he seemed so different from everyone else. Eli, who had avoided emotions for so long, felt a flicker in his chest, a feeling he had tried to forget, a warmth he had believed was gone forever. But the Wild West was not a place for slow encounters. Life demanded work, survival, and action. Clara returned to her chores, and Eli continued on his way, yet the memory of that brief moment lingered in both their minds. Clara couldn't stop thinking about the cowboy, the sadness in his eyes, and the quiet strength he seemed to carry. And Eli found himself glancing back, feeling a tug in his heart he didn't understand, as if fate had whispered that something important was waiting for him in that small town. As the days passed, Clara continued with her life, dreaming of a family and a love that seemed almost impossible in a world so harsh. She found comfort in her routines, the rhythm of the town, and the small joys that each day brought. But deep down, she could not shake the feeling that something, or someone, was coming to change everything. Eli, too, began to notice things he had not allowed himself to see for years. He found moments to visit the town more often, under the guise of helping neighbors or delivering supplies. He watched Clara from a distance, fascinated by her energy, her kindness, and the light she seemed to carry wherever she went. Slowly, the walls around his heart began to crack, just a little, as he realized that maybe, just maybe, life had more to offer than pain and solitude. And so, in the quiet of the Wild West, two lives began to move toward each other, guided by fate, curiosity, and the unspoken hope that even in a harsh and unforgiving world, love and dreams could find a way. Clara's heart held her vision of a family and laughter, and Eli's heart, long closed, felt the first stirrings of something he had thought impossible: hope. The sun set over the small town, painting the sky with shades of orange and pink, as if the world itself was blessing the beginning of something extraordinary. And in that moment, neither Clara nor Eli knew what the future held, but both felt deep in their hearts that life was about to change forever. One bright morning, as Clara prepared to take her small wagon to the market, she noticed a problem. One of the wagon's wheels had come loose overnight. She tried to tighten it herself, but the wood was old, the metal had rusted, and the wheel would not hold. Clara frowned, frustrated but determined. She had to reach the market before the sun went too high, or she would miss selling the fresh vegetables and flowers she had picked from her garden. The thought of letting down her neighbors made her push harder, but no matter how much she tried, the wheel refused to stay in place. As she struggled, a shadow fell across the wagon. Clara looked up to see a tall figure on horseback, silhouetted against the rising sun. It was Eli, the cowboy she had noticed days before, moving slowly along the trail. He stopped a few steps away, tipping his hat slightly in greeting. Clara felt a flutter in her chest, but she tried to remain calm. "Morning," she said cautiously. Eli nodded. "Need some help with that wheel?" he asked, his voice low but steady. Clara hesitated. She was used to solving her own problems, but the wheel seemed determined to defy her. She finally nodded. "Yes, please. I can't get it to stay no matter what I do." Eli dismounted gracefully, the leather of his boots creaking as he landed on the dusty ground. He examined the wheel carefully, turning it, tapping it, and checking the iron rim. Clara watched, curious. She had seen men fix wagons before, but Eli had a certain precision, a calmness in the way he moved, as if he was used to solving problems no matter how difficult. She couldn't help but notice how his eyes were focused, and yet, occasionally, they seemed to wander, as if thinking of something far away. "You're lucky you didn't try to go to the market like this," Eli said finally, tightening the wheel and securing it with a few simple movements. "It would have fallen off halfway there." Clara smiled, relief flooding her chest. "Thank you so much," she said, her voice warm. "I don't know what I would have done without you." Eli shrugged lightly. "It's nothing, just part of the day." But as he said it, Clara noticed a faint sadness in his eyes, a shadow behind the strength. She didn't know what it was, but something told her that Eli had seen more hardship than most people could imagine. "Would you like me to ride with you to the market?" he offered suddenly. Clara blinked in surprise. She hadn't expected him to offer, and she certainly hadn't expected to agree, but something inside her said yes. "That would be very kind," she replied. She climbed back onto her wagon, and Eli led his horse beside her, keeping a steady pace. As they traveled along the dusty trail, Clara found herself talking, almost without thinking. She spoke of her garden, the vegetables she had grown, the flowers she loved, and the neighbors she helped. Eli listened quietly, occasionally nodding, occasionally asking a question. His voice was calm, steady, and reassuring, and Clara felt a strange comfort in it. For the first time in weeks, she felt as if someone truly saw her, not just her work or her chores, but her heart and her dreams. Eli, for his part, found himself opening up in small ways. He spoke of the ranches he had worked on, the horses he had cared for, and the long hours spent riding across the open plains. He did not mention his past, not yet, but Clara sensed there was more behind the quiet cowboy than the world knew. She noticed the careful way he moved, the gentleness in his touch when he helped her secure the basket of vegetables, and the way he seemed to notice small details others overlooked. By the time they reached the market, Clara felt as if she had known Eli far longer than a single morning. The townspeople glanced curiously at the pair, whispering among themselves about the quiet cowboy and the cheerful young woman. Clara ignored them. She was focused on the moment, on the shared experience of fixing the wagon and traveling together. For the first time, she felt a spark of hope that her dreams of love and family might not be so impossible after all. Eli helped Clara unload the wagon and set up her small stall. He carried the heavier baskets of vegetables, arranged the flowers carefully so they caught the morning sun, and even offered a few kind words to the townspeople who passed by. Clara watched him, fascinated by the contrast in his personality. He was quiet, reserved, and cautious, yet every small action was thoughtful and deliberate. She realized she was beginning to trust him, and that trust was something she had never given to anyone outside her family. As the morning passed, they worked together seamlessly. Clara sold her vegetables and flowers, and Eli stayed nearby, keeping watch and helping when needed. Occasionally, they exchanged a smile or a brief conversation, but much of the time, they simply shared the space quietly, comfortable in each other's presence. Clara felt a sense of peace she had not known before, and Eli, despite himself, felt a warmth growing in his chest. After the market, they began the walk back to Clara's home. The sun was higher now, warming the earth, and the air smelled of fresh hay and wildflowers. Clara spoke more openly, telling Eli about her dreams of having 5 children and a home filled with love. She described the laughter she imagined echoing through the halls, the small hands reaching for hers, and the joy she hoped to share with a family. Eli listened silently, but each word touched something deep inside him. He had once had a family, had once dreamed of the same things, and hearing Clara speak of them awakened memories he had tried to forget. For the first time in years, Eli felt conflicted. Part of him wanted to retreat, to return to his solitary life on the plains where no one could hurt him. But another part, a part he had long ignored, wanted to reach out, to be near Clara, and perhaps to imagine a future that was no longer impossible. The emotions were new, confusing, and a little frightening, but they were real. He realized he had not felt hope in a long time, and that hope was both thrilling and terrifying. When they reached Clara's home, Eli paused at the gate, unsure whether to leave or stay a little longer. Clara smiled at him, sensing the hesitation. "Thank you, Eli," she said softly. "I don't know what I would have done today without you." He tipped his hat, his usual quiet manner returning. "Any time," he said. Then, after a brief pause, he added, "I'll be around if you need more help with the wagon or anything else." Clara's heart skipped a beat and she nodded. "I'll remember that." As Eli rode away, Clara watched him go, feeling a mixture of curiosity and hope. Something about him was different from anyone she had ever met. He was strong yet gentle, quiet yet full of emotion, and though he seemed guarded, she sensed a depth of kindness and courage beneath the surface. She didn't know if he would ever fully open his heart, but she felt certain that he had the power to change her life in ways she had never imagined. Eli, on the other hand, rode slowly back toward the plains, thinking of Clara. Her words, her laughter, and her dreams lingered in his mind. For the first time in years, he allowed himself to imagine a future that included someone else, someone he could care for and protect. The thought was both exhilarating and frightening. He had promised himself never to love again, never to open his heart, yet here was a young woman whose spirit was strong enough to challenge that promise. In the following days, Eli found reasons to cross paths with Clara more often. Sometimes it was by chance, sometimes by design, but each encounter brought them closer. They shared small tasks like repairing fences, carrying water, or helping neighbors in need. Each moment together was simple, ordinary, but it was also meaningful. Clara learned more about Eli, the way he treated animals, the respect he had for the land, and the quiet patience he showed to those around him. Eli learned about Clara, the way she could find joy in the smallest things, the kindness she offered without expecting anything in return, and the strength hidden behind her gentle demeanor. Slowly, the bond between them grew. It was not rushed, not dramatic, but steady and real. Clara began to feel that her dream of a family and a loving home might not be so far-fetched, and Eli began to feel that maybe, just maybe, life had something more to offer than solitude and sorrow. They were two people from different worlds, brought together by fate, circumstance, and a shared moment of kindness that neither would ever forget. By the time the sun set on the third day of their unexpected companionship, both Clara and Eli knew that something had changed. The spark of connection had been lit, quiet but undeniable. Clara's heart held hope, and Eli's heart, long closed, felt the first stirrings of trust. They were still cautious, still aware of the past and the dangers of the world, but they had found in each other a sense of possibility. And so, life in the small Wild West town continued, with Clara tending her garden, running her stall at the market, and dreaming of the family she hoped to build. Eli continued his travels, helping wherever he could, and slowly allowing himself to imagine a future he had once believed impossible. Each day brought them closer, each small encounter building a foundation of understanding, respect, and a budding affection that neither of them had expected but both had come to cherish. In the quiet moments, when the sun dipped behind the hills and painted the sky in shades of orange and pink, Clara would sometimes whisper to herself about the future, imagining a life filled with love, laughter, and children playing in the yard. And Eli, far away on the plains, would glance toward the town, feeling a warmth in his chest that had been missing for so long. Two hearts, slowly learning to trust, slowly learning to hope, and slowly preparing for a life that could be more beautiful than either had ever dreamed. Days turned into weeks, and the bond between Clara and Eli began to grow in quiet, unexpected ways. It was not sudden or dramatic. There were no fireworks or grand declarations, only the slow, steady building of trust and understanding. Each day brought small gestures, brief conversations, and moments of shared work that began to weave their lives together. Clara found herself looking forward to Eli's visits, curious about what he might say or do, and Eli, for the first time in many years, found reasons to pause, to linger, and to notice the little things in life that he had long ignored. It began with small tasks. Clara's garden needed tending, and Eli, though more accustomed to riding and ranch work, offered to help. Together they dug, planted, and watered. Clara laughed when Eli accidentally watered his own boots instead of the flowers, and Eli smiled quietly, shaking his head at his clumsiness. She teased him gently, and for the first time Eli laughed freely, a sound that startled even him. The act of working side by side created a rhythm between them, a comfort that neither had expected. They learned to anticipate each other's movements, to offer help before it was asked, and to share silent moments without awkwardness. Clara began to open up more about her dreams, speaking of her wish for a family with 5 children. She described the way she imagined their laughter filling the home, the way little hands would reach for hers, and how she wanted to teach them about kindness and courage. Eli listened carefully, never interrupting, though each word seemed to stir something deep within him. He had once had dreams like these, dreams that had been shattered by loss. Hearing Clara speak of them again made him both ache and hope. He felt a longing he thought he had buried forever, and the idea of imagining a life with someone else, someone like Clara, was both thrilling and frightening. One afternoon, after a long day of work in the garden, Clara and Eli sat beneath a large oak tree, enjoying the shade and the cool breeze. Clara leaned against the tree, wiping sweat from her brow, while Eli polished the bridle of his horse. They were quiet for a while, simply enjoying each other's presence. Then Clara spoke softly, almost as if she were sharing a secret with the world. "Do you ever think about what life could be if it were different?" she asked. Eli looked at her, surprised by the question. "I try not to," he said slowly, his voice low. "It's easier to focus on what is rather than what might have been." Clara nodded, understanding his hesitation. "I know," she said gently, "but sometimes I like to imagine. To think that maybe life can give us more than we expect, if we are brave enough to hope." Eli studied her face, noticing the sparkle in her eyes and the softness in her expression. He realized that hope was something he had almost forgotten. It was a dangerous feeling, he thought, because hope could lead to pain, but somehow with Clara it felt different. It felt possible, it felt safe. As the days passed, Eli began to share small parts of his past. He spoke of the ranches he had worked on, the long rides across the plains, and the nights spent under the stars. Clara listened, asking questions, curious about the world he had traveled and the experiences he had lived. Eli did not speak much about his lost family, not yet, but the fact that he was willing to talk at all was a sign of trust. He had spent years shutting himself off from the world, and now he was allowing Clara to see pieces of himself that he had hidden away. Clara, in turn, shared stories of her childhood, her dreams, and her ambitions. She told Eli about the simple joys she had found in life, like the way the sun felt on her face during the early morning, or the smell of fresh bread from the town bakery. She spoke of her wish to help people, to make the town a better place, and to build a family filled with love. Eli listened intently, realizing that her dreams were not naive or unrealistic. They were rooted in strength, compassion, and determination. He admired her courage and her ability to find light in a world that could be harsh and unforgiving. Over time, they began to notice subtle changes in each other. Clara observed the gentleness in Eli's actions, the way he treated animals with care, and how he always considered the feelings of others. She noticed the quiet patience he showed when faced with challenges, and the strength that seemed to radiate from him without needing to boast. Eli noticed Clara's resilience, her kindness, and her unwavering optimism. He saw how she faced difficulties with grace, how she cared for her neighbors, and how her laughter could brighten even the dullest of days. One evening, as the sun dipped below the horizon and painted the sky with hues of orange and pink, Eli found himself walking Clara home. The air was cool, and the scent of wildflowers filled the path. They walked side by side in comfortable silence, each lost in their own thoughts but aware of the other's presence. Clara glanced at Eli, noticing the thoughtful expression on his face. "You've changed a lot since I first met you," she said softly. Eli looked at her, a faint smile playing on his lips. "Maybe," he replied, "or maybe I've just started to notice things I didn't before." Clara smiled, understanding more than he realized. "Sometimes we don't see what's right in front of us until someone shows us," she said. Eli considered her words carefully. He had spent so many years avoiding connections, believing that attachment only led to pain. Yet now he realized that sharing his life with someone he trusted could bring a kind of joy he had almost forgotten. Clara had shown him that hope was not weakness, that trust was not foolishness, and that love could be gentle and healing rather than destructive. Their connection deepened with each passing day. Clara began to feel a sense of safety she had never experienced before, a feeling that Eli would stand by her side no matter what challenges arose. Eli, in turn, discovered a sense of purpose he had long abandoned. Caring for Clara, protecting her, and sharing in her dreams gave his life new meaning. He began to imagine a future where happiness was not just a memory, but a possibility, a future where he could be part of a family, part of something larger than himself. As their bond grew, the townspeople began to notice the change in Eli. The quiet cowboy who had once been distant and reserved now smiled more often, spoke with kindness, and even helped others without being asked. Clara's influence was subtle but powerful, reminding him that life could be more than survival and solitude. People in town whispered about the unlikely friendship, but neither Clara nor Eli paid much attention. They were focused on the growing trust between them, on the shared moments of laughter, and the quiet comfort of being understood. One afternoon, as they worked together repairing a fence on the outskirts of town, Clara spoke about her dreams once more. "I want a home filled with children," she said, hammering a nail into place. "5 of them running around, laughing and learning about life. I want them to know love and safety and happiness. I want to give them everything I've ever dreamed of having." Eli paused, leaning on his hammer, and looked at her with a new sense of admiration. Her dreams were big, but they were rooted in love, not selfishness. He felt a stirring in his chest, a desire to be part of the life she envisioned, to protect it, and to build it alongside her. In that moment, Eli made a quiet promise to himself. He would try. He would allow himself to hope, to trust, and perhaps to love again. It would not be easy. He knew the past could not be erased, but he was willing to take the risk for Clara, for the possibility of a future filled with joy and connection. As the sun set behind the hills, casting long shadows across the town, Clara and Eli walked home together. Their hands brushed occasionally, each touch carrying a silent understanding and unspoken promise. They were not yet lovers, not yet a family, but the foundation of something extraordinary had been laid. Each day, each moment, brought them closer to the life they both dreamed of, a life where love was possible, where hope could thrive, and where 2 hearts, once guarded and wary, could finally open to one another. That night, as Clara sat by her window, she thought of Eli and the strange twist of fate that had brought him into her life. She felt excitement, curiosity, and a cautious hope that the future could be brighter than she had ever imagined. And miles away, Eli lay beneath the stars, thinking of Clara, her laughter, her kindness, and the dreams she carried in her heart. For the first time in many years, he allowed himself to imagine a life with her in it, a life of love, trust, and family. In the Wild West, where life was often harsh and unpredictable, two souls had found a connection that was rare and precious. It was quiet, steady, and filled with promise. Clara and Eli were learning that love was not about rushing or grand gestures. It was about patience, understanding, and the willingness to share one's heart. And though the path ahead would not be easy, they had taken the first steps together, guided by hope, trust, and the gentle power of human connection. The seasons were changing, and life in the small Wild West town carried on with its usual rhythm, but a sense of quiet tension began to settle over Clara and Eli. Their connection had grown steadily over weeks, each day building trust, laughter, and hope. Yet, life in the Wild West was never easy, and the universe seemed determined to test them. It began with small challenges, ordinary struggles that slowly piled up, reminding them that happiness, even when found, could never be taken for granted. Winter arrived earlier than expected that year. The mornings were sharp and cold, with frost covering the fields and a biting wind that made even the bravest shiver. Clara worked tirelessly to prepare her home and garden for the harsh months ahead. She bundled firewood, tended to her small store of preserved vegetables, and ensured that her modest home could withstand the chill. Her determination was admirable, but even she could not escape the difficulties that the season brought. The town faced shortages, and the frost threatened the remaining crops that farmers had struggled to grow all year. Clara knew she had to stay strong, not only for herself but for the people she cared about. Eli, who had grown accustomed to Clara's spirit and resilience, did his best to support her. He rode out to check on the neighboring farms, repaired fences before the snow could collapse them, and hunted for food when needed. The townspeople had long respected him for his strength and skill, but now they saw a gentler side, a man who had found purpose in caring for another person, someone who had once vowed never to love but now stood quietly beside the woman he had come to care for deeply. Despite their efforts, life proved to be relentless. One afternoon, Clara fell ill. She had been working in the cold too long, and the harsh wind had caught her unprepared. Her body shivered with fever, and her usually bright eyes were dull with exhaustion. Eli was beside himself with worry. He had faced danger many times, battled storms, and survived the harshest conditions of the open plains, but seeing Clara so vulnerable awakened a fear he had never known before. He did not leave her side, tending to her with gentle hands, making warm tea, and ensuring the fire burned brightly. Every moment he spent with her, he felt a mixture of helplessness and determination. He would not let anything harm her if he could prevent it. During those long nights, as Clara rested beneath blankets and the fire crackled beside her, Eli found himself speaking softly to her about small things, telling stories of his past, of the plains, and of moments of beauty he had witnessed even in loneliness. Clara listened, her weak voice carrying soft laughter at times. The illness, though severe, allowed them to grow even closer. Eli saw how strong Clara was, even when vulnerable, and Clara saw how gentle and caring Eli could be, even when he was accustomed to harshness and solitude. The town, too, faced struggles that tested the community's resolve. Supplies ran low, and many families struggled to provide enough food for their children. Clara, despite her own illness, insisted on helping her neighbors. Eli, witnessing her determination, joined her efforts, lending strength and protection as they distributed vegetables, blankets, and firewood. The work was exhausting, but it reminded both of them that love and courage were not simply feelings. They were actions, small but powerful, that could make life better for those around them. One evening, as they returned from delivering supplies, a sudden storm rolled in from the plains. The wind howled, carrying snow and dust, and the town's usually quiet streets became treacherous. Clara stumbled as the cold bit at her face, and Eli quickly caught her, shielding her from the harsh elements with his coat. They made their way home slowly, leaning on each other for balance and support. The storm raged around them, yet inside, they found warmth and comfort in each other's presence. For Eli, it was a revelation. He had spent so many years alone, but now he realized that facing life's hardships with someone by his side made even the most difficult challenges bearable. Despite the growing warmth between them, old fears and memories began to surface in Eli's mind. He remembered the loss that had once taken everything from him, the family he could never replace, and the promises he had made to himself never to love again. The pain was still there, hidden beneath the strength he projected, and at times it threatened to pull him back into solitude. Clara, sensing his hesitation, never pushed him. She understood that healing and trust took time. Her patience and quiet faith in him created a safe space where he could slowly confront his fears without judgment. Their growing bond was also tested by external pressures. Rumors in town began to circulate about their relationship, some whispering that a cowboy like Eli could never be trusted to stay, while others admired the way Clara had softened his heart. The gossip was a distraction, but neither Clara nor Eli allowed it to break their focus. They were learning to trust each other, to depend on each other, and to value the connection they had built over weeks of small but meaningful interactions. One particularly difficult day, Eli discovered that a neighboring family had lost their home to the storm. The parents were devastated and their children were frightened and hungry. Clara insisted that they help immediately. Together, they organized food, firewood, and blankets, ensuring that the family could survive the night. Watching Clara care for others with such dedication, Eli felt a mixture of awe and deep affection. He realized that this was the woman he wanted by his side, the person whose dreams and courage matched his own hidden desires for family, love, and connection. Through these trials, their relationship became stronger. Clara learned to rely on Eli not just for physical support, but for emotional strength. She saw that his past sorrow did not make him weak. It had given him depth, patience, and an understanding of life that few possessed. Eli, in turn, saw that Clara's optimism was not naive, but a source of courage that could face even the harshest winters. Together, they discovered that love was not about perfection. It was about facing difficulties together, supporting each other, and choosing to care even when life was unforgiving. As winter slowly gave way to early spring, their trials had left them exhausted but closer than ever. Clara's illness had passed, the storm had subsided, and the town had recovered from its losses. Yet the challenges had left a mark on both of them. They had been tested, and through the tests, they had discovered the depth of their feelings, the resilience of their hearts, and the strength of the bond that had formed between them. Each obstacle had brought them closer, teaching them patience, trust, and the quiet power of being present for someone else in times of need. One evening, as the sun dipped behind the hills and the air smelled faintly of blooming flowers and damp earth, Eli and Clara sat outside her home. The hardships of the past months weighed lightly on their minds, but the warmth between them was undeniable. Clara spoke softly about the future, about the family she dreamed of, and about the hope she carried in her heart. Eli listened, feeling both fear and excitement. He knew that stepping fully into love was a risk, but the thought of building a life with Clara, facing future challenges together, and perhaps someday raising a family with her, was a risk he was willing to take. It was during these quiet moments that Eli realized the depth of his own transformation. He had once believed that love would only bring pain, that opening his heart was too dangerous, and that happiness was fleeting. But Clara had shown him that hope could exist even in the hardest places, that trust could heal old wounds, and that love could be gentle, patient, and enduring. He understood that his past sorrow would never fully disappear, but it no longer controlled him. He had found something worth fighting for, worth protecting and worth nurturing, a life with Clara. By the end of the season, the bond between Clara and Eli had become unbreakable. They had faced illness, harsh weather, and the challenges of the Wild West together, and each obstacle had strengthened their connection. They had discovered that love was not just an emotion, but a choice, a decision to care for another, to support them, and to build a life together despite the difficulties. And as they looked toward the future, both of them felt a quiet certainty that whatever hardships lay ahead, they would face them together, with courage, patience, and unwavering devotion. The trials of winter and early spring had tested their love, but in doing so, they had revealed the depth of their hearts. Clara's dream of a family seemed closer than ever, and Eli's heart, long closed, had begun to open fully. The hardships they had endured together had not broken them. They had made them stronger, more compassionate, and more determined to create a life filled with love and hope. In the end, the lessons of the season were clear. Love was not easy, life was not without challenges, but with trust, patience, and courage, two hearts could overcome any obstacle. Clara and Eli had learned this firsthand, and as they stood together, watching the sun set over the hills, they knew that their story was only just beginning. Spring had fully arrived in the small Wild West town, bringing warmth, life, and a sense of renewal after the harsh winter. The streets were filled with the scent of blooming flowers, the chatter of neighbors, and the laughter of children playing in the yards. For Clara and Eli, this season marked more than just a change in weather. It was the beginning of the life they had quietly built together through trust, patience, and shared experiences. They had faced illness, storms, and the challenges of life in the frontier, and through it all, their bond had grown stronger. Now, the future they had both dreamed of seemed closer than ever. Eli had become a steady presence in Clara's life, no longer the distant, solitary cowboy he had once been. He spent his days helping Clara with her work, tending to the garden, repairing fences, and ensuring that her home was safe and comfortable. But more than that, he was there in the small, ordinary moments, bringing water, helping carry baskets, or simply sitting with her on the porch as the sun dipped below the hills. Clara noticed the changes in him, the way his eyes softened when he looked at her, the small smiles that had become more frequent, and the quiet patience that now defined his character. She had come to trust him fully, and in doing so had opened the door to a future she had long imagined. The town had noticed too. People whispered about the unlikely couple, the kind-hearted young woman who dreamed of a family, and the cowboy who had once sworn never to love again. But the gossip no longer mattered to them. They had found in each other a source of strength and happiness that went beyond the opinions of others. Clara and Eli were focused on the life they wanted to build together, a life filled with love, laughter, and the fulfillment of dreams long held in their hearts. One afternoon, Eli surprised Clara with a small gift. It was a simple wooden cradle, carved with care and attention to detail. He had made it himself, spending countless hours after work perfecting it. Clara's eyes filled with tears when she saw it. She had long dreamed of children and a home filled with their laughter, and here was Eli, quietly making that dream feel possible. "It's beautiful," she whispered, her voice trembling. "It's more than I ever imagined." Eli simply smiled, his own heart full. "It's a start," he said softly, "a start of everything we've been waiting for." Over the following months, their life together began to take shape in ways both small and profound. Clara's garden flourished, providing fresh vegetables and flowers not only for her family but for the neighbors she cared for. Eli worked on the land, repaired homes and fences, and ensured that their home was safe and welcoming. They laughed together, shared meals, and spent long evenings by the fire, telling stories and imagining the family they would one day have. Each day, their connection deepened, their trust grew, and their love became undeniable. Eventually, their long-awaited day came. Clara and Eli were married in a small, simple ceremony in the town's church. Neighbors attended, friends and family gathered, and the air was filled with joy and celebration. Clara wore a modest dress, her hair braided simply, and Eli looked proud and nervous in his best coat. There were no grand displays, no extravagant decorations, only the sincerity of two hearts joining together. The ceremony was heartfelt, filled with promises of love, respect, and commitment, and when they exchanged their vows, both felt a sense of peace and happiness that was unlike anything they had known before. After the wedding, life settled into a comforting routine. Clara and Eli worked together to create a home that was warm and welcoming. They tended the garden, cared for their home, and continued helping neighbors. But the true fulfillment of Clara's dream came slowly, with the arrival of their first child. The tiny, delicate life that entered their world brought with it laughter, tears, and a joy so profound that it seemed to fill every corner of their home. Clara cradled the baby with love and tenderness, while Eli, once so wary of attachment, held the child with a quiet reverence, marveling at the miracle of new life. One by one, as the years passed, their family grew. Each child was a blessing, bringing joy, mischief, and love into their home. Clara's dream of 5 children became a reality. Their home was filled with the sounds of laughter, the pitter-patter of little feet, and the warmth of love shared freely among them. Eli, the cowboy who had once sworn never to love again, discovered a new kind of happiness, one that came not from solitude or self-reliance, but from the bonds of family, the comfort of partnership, and the simple, extraordinary act of being present for those he loved. Through it all, Clara and Eli faced challenges, as all families do. Illnesses, storms, and the demands of life on the frontier tested their patience and resolve. But their love, strengthened by years of trust and understanding, carried them through. Clara's optimism and strength inspired Eli, while his quiet support and resilience gave her courage. Together, they discovered that a strong family was built not on perfection, but on care, patience, and the willingness to face life's difficulties side by side. Neighbors often admired the family, noting the harmony and warmth that radiated from their home. Clara and Eli became pillars of the community, not through grand gestures, but through everyday actions that reflected kindness, love, and dedication. They taught their children the value of hard work, compassion, and integrity, and instilled in them a sense of hope and possibility. The children grew up with laughter in their hearts, stories of resilience in their minds, and love surrounding them at every turn. Eli sometimes reflected on his past, the sorrow that had once consumed him, the losses that had led him to close his heart. And yet, he no longer felt the weight of despair. Clara's presence had transformed his life, showing him that love could heal even the deepest wounds. He had learned that hope was not foolishness, that trust was not weakness, and that love, when nurtured patiently and carefully, could grow into something strong, enduring, and beautiful. Clara, too, often reflected on her journey. She had dreamed of a family, of children and laughter, and she had waited patiently, believing that her wish would come true. The path had not been easy. There had been moments of fear, uncertainty, and doubt, but she had held fast to hope. And now, surrounded by her husband and children, she understood that dreams, when paired with courage, patience, and love, could indeed become reality. As the years went by, their children grew, each with their own personalities, talents, and dreams. The house that Clara had imagined so long ago was now filled with life in a way that exceeded even her hopes. There were moments of chaos, of spilled milk, of scraped knees and tears, but these moments were also filled with laughter, learning, and growth. The family was not perfect, but it was real, vibrant, and alive, a testament to the power of love, patience, and unwavering hope. Eli and Clara often walked together in the evenings, hand in hand, watching their children play in the yard and talking quietly about their lives. They spoke of the past, the challenges they had faced, and the journey that had brought them together. They spoke of the future, the dreams they still held, and the family they had created. And in these quiet moments, they found a deep contentment, a sense of fulfillment that came not from wealth or status, but from the love they shared and the life they had built together. In the end, the story of Clara and Eli was one of hope, resilience, and the transformative power of love. Clara's wish for 5 children had been realized, not through luck or ease, but through patience, trust, and unwavering faith in the goodness of life. Eli, the cowboy who had once believed he could never love again, discovered that the heart was capable of healing, of opening, and of embracing joy even after sorrow. Together, they had built a family, a home, and a life that was filled with laughter, warmth, and enduring love. The Wild West, with all its challenges and hardships, had tested them, shaped them, and ultimately rewarded them. Clara and Eli had faced illness, storms, and the uncertainties of frontier life, but they had emerged stronger, bound together by love, trust, and shared dreams. Their story became an inspiration to those around them, a reminder that even in the harshest circumstances, hope could flourish and dreams could come true. As the sun set over the hills one peaceful evening, Clara and Eli sat on the porch, watching their children play in the yard, their laughter echoing across the land. Eli held Clara's hand, and she leaned against him, feeling the warmth and strength of the man who had once been broken, but was now whole through love. They did not need grand words or promises. They had already built the life they had dreamed of, one filled with family, joy, and the quiet, unshakable happiness that comes from knowing you are exactly where you are meant to be. And so, the cowboy who had never meant to love again, and the woman whose wish had been for 5 children, found in each other the greatest reward of all: a life full of love, a family full of laughter, and a future brighter than they had ever imagined. Their story, simple yet profound, became a testament to the power of hope, the importance of patience, and the enduring strength of the human heart.